To today's webinar. It's about what's coming next in IBM's Analytics Workspace. Workspace is something that we've learned to love over the years, and it is totally transformed how we use TM1 these days. And we really excited to have Stuart here today with us to showcase what's new in Workspace in the last few releases, but also talk about what's in the roadmap. So Stuart's been part of IBM for over 7 years. He's been one of the senior product managers for TM1, and he knows the product inside out. So we're really lucky to have him here today to showcase what's new and also, more importantly, what's coming. I'm Amendra Pratap. I'm from Octane Solutions. So we are a IBM partner. We like to modernize the TM1 application. We've got clients globally, and we really like to share what we know in this space with everyone, regardless of where you are in the world. We also like to believe that if you use us, we generally tend to reduce your cost of ownership of TM1 by at least 35%. So if you want to talk about that, you can contact us later. What we'll be talking about today, however, is more around what the dashboarding capabilities in TM1 in planning analytics, what's new in there, what's coming, and what the technical team is currently working on. So without taking too much of your time, I will hand over to Stuart King to take us away. Thank you, Stuart.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Maybe a quick confirmation that you can see my screen as well. But still, we're good.
Now we
Okay,
can.
perfect. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, as you mentioned, my name is Stuart King. I'm one of the senior product managers for planning analytics at IBM. I sort of work within the traditional product management role. So I spend most of my time either working with our customers, kind of trying to understand their requirements and the use cases for our product. And then I spend the rest of my time basically working with our designers and developers to build, plan, and implement, and eventually release the features that show up in the product every single month. One of the reasons Workspace is so interesting to work on for me is that we do release it almost every single month. So because there's kind of frequent updates to Workspace, we're always working on new features, and we always have the opportunity to get new features out the door and into the hands of our customers. One of the sort of adverse effects of this is that a lot of times our customers can't keep up with the kind of rate of new features and capabilities that we introduce into the product. So of course, we like to take the opportunity to kind of show off some of these features, which is what we're going to do today. So just a few details about Planning Analytics Workspace first, just in the context of 2025 and our roadmap. We are doing 10 releases of Workspace this year. It's almost one release a month, although we didn't release in January, and we're also missing the August release. Technically, there's kind of no August release, so the next major release is going to be September. We release, of course, to on-premise, so our customers run Planning Analytics on-premise, on Planning Analytics on Cloud, which is sort of our original cloud or SaaS offering, and then, of course, on the newer Planning Analytics SaaS offering as well. One of the challenging things, of course, about Workspace is that we do support both TM1 version 11 and TM1 version 12. The majority of our customers being on TM1 version 11 at this point, but we do have about 200 customers at this point that are actually using Planning Analytics Workspace with our newer TM1 V12 database, primarily in the Planning Analytics SaaS offering. However, we are working to change that. So October this year, we plan to release a Planning Analytics Local 3.1, which will be the on-premise version of Planning Analytics that includes the TM1 V12 database. Ignore the typo on the slide. It's not TM2, it's still TM1. But this is going to be our way of actually delivering the TM1 V12 database as part of a on-premise offering for our customers. And as part of that, we're actually going to provide a new version of Planning Analytics Workspace called Planning Analytics Workspace Local 3.1, with a few subtle differences in terms of how it's deployed and kind of the architecture of the product, how it works with things like security. But effectively, other than that, it's the same version of Planning Analytics Workspace. One interesting thing is even just in 2025, we've released about just over 100 new features already this year within Planning Analytics Workspace. So if you wanted to get a comprehensive overview of the new features that we've released to see them all, we do have a new features guide, sort of a what's new portion of our documentation that covers each of the new features that goes into the product. And then on top of that, we also have a public roadmap that shows all the features that are being released in the remainder of the year and leading into 2026. So if you want to see what we've done, or you want more details about what we're doing, that is sort of within the public domain, either within our roadmap doc online or our documentation that gets updated with every single monthly release. Okay, so before we talk about features themselves and kind of show some of the features, I just want to talk really quickly about why we're doing what we're doing, what our motivation is to improve the product at a kind of higher level. So we really think about the work we're doing as kind of fitting into one of three categories. The first category being service modernization. For Planning Analytics Workspace, this typically means improving self-service, right? So for our customers on the cloud, we want to enable those customers to do things for themselves, like be able to create databases and scale databases without having to open up support tickets, right? For our customers who are on premise, it's being able to do things like access files that have been exported through Turbo Integrator processes through our file manager capability, right? But basically, we're trying to modernize our product, whether you're on premise or on cloud, to make it very service oriented and to really support the concept of self-service, right? This benefits kind of all roles across planning analytics. One of the probably biggest pieces that we're still working on this year that are going to help this sort of service modernization is actually APIs or REST API access to Planning Analytics Workspace itself. Of course, with TM1, we have a very strong REST API that's leveraged by our client tools and many of our business partners, building their own tools and solutions that involve our REST API for the TM1 database. We're trying to provide a REST API for Planning Analytics Workspace itself. Why? Because you may want to access capabilities like our forecasting capability, or exporting a workspace book. Those are capabilities of Planning Analytics Workspace. And if you want to integrate those capabilities into your own third-party applications or own solutions without the user actually having to log into the product, we need an API to expose those capabilities. Those sort of capabilities also very important for agentic AI, being able to access the forecasting capability and other features within Workspace, not just TM1, is going to be critical to kind of support of agentic AI with Planning Analytics. And speaking of AI, the other category, or one of the other categories that really kind of drives what we're doing within the product, is sort of embedding AI within Planning Analytics. At this point, most of our AI capabilities through our AI assistant have been embedded directly into Planning Analytics Workspace. So a lot of these are exposed through things like the charting capability in Planning Analytics Workspace, or the data exploration like our Cube Viewer widget. But we're also working on building capabilities into some of the features outside of the Cube Viewer. So for example, the forecasting capability, we're working on a feature right now that's going to use generative AI to kind of explain the forecast that's being generated by our forecasting service. Another thing that we're looking at with AI, beyond just embedding it into the products, is also integration with other services. So for example, watsonx. So allowing our customers who want to leverage our AI services or IBM AI services their own way, as opposed to kind of just pre-canned product features, and making that connection very easy for those use cases to be sort of enabled between Planning Analytics Workspace and AI services such as watsonx. The third category here, and probably the most important one, is the concept of actually the business owning the application, as opposed to a developer or kind of an expert in Planning Analytics or TM1. So this is a key concept within Workspace. We're basically trying to empower the analyst role to do more without having to understand the technical details of the product, right? So this is intended to increase time to value. A good example, maybe a very kind of simple example of this, is things like calculations within Planning Analytics Workspace. So our Cube Viewer in Planning Analytics Workspace, it allows you to create calculations by selecting two members and then opening up a calculation user interface. This is really helpful because, if you didn't have this capability, your options would be to kind of create these calculations in Excel using either Math and Excel, or you'd have to do a bit of model development work where you're creating rules on a cube that are populating the value in a cell, right? So we're trying to empower, again, sort of like this role that we consider the analyst role, basically a business user, a less technical role, to do more with the product without having to understand how to do things like write Turbo Integrator code or to develop rules and feeders, right? Just because those concepts can be complex and very time consuming. So as we sort of improve our kind of capability set around the analyst experience, we expect that we'll be able to transition more people away from kind of the classic model development role, relying on model development sort of activity, to more of the end user role where they can kind of self-service through the application. Okay, so with those kind of three categories in mind, we'll actually cover a couple of the features that we released this year. And as I mentioned, we released about 100 features already this year. So these slides actually cover a mix of some of the features that are released already previously this year. Those are the ones with the check marks to the right, and also some of the features that we're expecting to release in the remainder of the year. So 2025, one of the biggest things that we've sort of invested in within the workspace book experience is our action buttons, right? So we're not just enhancing our cube viewer and the visualizations, but we're also enhancing our action buttons. Why? Because the action buttons in workspace books allow us to build interactive applications. They allow us to run processes, which is important for concepts like workflow and even kind of complex navigation between books. So some of the things that we've done for action buttons within Workspace is custom messages. So like if you're running a process and your process passes or fails, you can send a specific message back to the user that clicked the button. Earlier this year, we also did dynamic navigation based on the process status. So if you looked at Workspace last year, you would notice that when you use an action button on a Workspace book to run a process and then navigate, it would only navigate if the process succeeded. Now you can choose to navigate if the process succeeded. If it failed, you can navigate to one book if it failed, a different book if it passes. You can navigate only if it fails, right? This opens up interesting use cases like being able to use an action button to run a process to do validation. And then if the validation fails, right, like let's say the user made an invalid selection, we can navigate them to a book that kind of explains why the selection was invalid. We also improved the way parameter values are collected, right? So if we're passing parameter values to a process on the click of a button, we can now collect those parameter values from a cell. For example, we can read a specific cell. We can read members that are synchronized by other widgets and pass those through. It's kind of important capabilities. One of the things I'll demo a little bit later is how we can actually pass subsets as well, or selections of members, whether it's named subsets or unnamed subsets to TI process as well. And a little bit later this year, probably before the end of the year, we also want to enhance just our support for kind of sandboxes in general within Workspace books. In particular, turbo integrator processes that are run from the click of a button on a Workspace book could operate in the context of a sandbox if we pass the context of the sandbox to the process. It's not something that we have yet in the product, but it's something that we're planning on adding by the end of the year. One question that we often get about Planning Analytics Workspace is if Workspace is going to supersede web sheets, right, or if it's going to negate the need for web sheets, right? And we can clearly state the answer to that is no. Web sheets are still kind of a strategic technology at IBM. It's an area that we continue to enhance within the product. When we actually did some work earlier this year to kind of improve the way web sheets work in Workspace books, simply making it a little bit easier for Workspace book authors to create the web sheet widget in Workspace books and kind of understand where it originally pointed to with the web sheet. We also added a bit of an improvement where if you replace one web sheet with another, you don't have to kind of resize the widget and reconfigure the widget. You can simply drag one web sheet over another web sheet widget in an existing book in order to kind of replace the web sheet on the book when you're in the book authoring experience. One of the things that's not listed here, which is actually really, really helpful for our users who are still using web sheets or blending web sheets into Workspace books, is also the management of web sheets within the modeling experience. So the Planning Analytics Workspace Modeling Workbench this year, it had fairly big improvements to the web sheet kind of management experience, allowing you to do things like rename and delete web sheets, change them from public to private through the modeling workbench. So you can actually manage it in a place other than Planning Analytics for Excel. The synchronization details, we'll actually do a quick demo to kind of show our new multi-select member selector that's being released in about a month's time. Another area of Planning Analytics Workspace, which received kind of a lot of attention this year, was our formatting capabilities, right? So we're trying to take on some of the formatting sort of capabilities that were sort of unique to Planning Analytics for Excel, right? If you think about the conditional formatting in Excel, it's very powerful. So we want to kind of embed some of that capabilities directly into the Cube Viewer and Planning Analytics Workspace. So as of current releases, we can now do web formatting on the Cube Viewer based on properties of members. So things like the name of the member, the level of the member, attribute values of the member can be used to actually drive the formatting that appears. And this is really important because it gives us sort of the ability to do dynamic formatting, whereas its parent-child relationships change within a dimension or a hierarchy, or as attribute values are updated by users or updated by a process that's running, we can actually dynamically change the formatting that's presented on the Cube Viewer. On top of this, we also just had some generic improvements to the formatting capabilities on the Cube Viewer itself, right? So again, looking back to this last year, we were not able to do formatting where you simply picked a member and then stated that you want like the background color of the row or column for that member to be a specific color. So now we can do that. In fact, one of the biggest enhancement requests that we're kind of looking at in 2024 was simply the ability to customize the colors of the Cube Viewer, so that when we're looking at things like rule-derived cell values, they appear as a color other than the kind of default green color that everyone's probably very familiar with. And again, these sort of customizations of the colors based on the status of the cell or the properties of the members on the rows and columns, that's all been implemented and kind of released, within the first half of this year. There are still some enhancements that are planned for formatting. Probably the biggest one that we're working on right now is the ability to actually support things like hyperlinks and richly formatted text in string cells in the Cube Viewer and our single cell widget, right? So that will enable us to do things like have hyperlinks show up where we can click on a hyperlink in a cell and then open up another tab in the browser to a third-party application. This will actually be really useful, especially if you were using Cognos Analytics or other reporting applications where those applications accept a context, right? Because we can generate or form URLs using rules, which are used to kind of pass context maybe to a report that you're navigating to from the Cube Viewer in Planning Analytics Workspace. One other area that we have made heavy investments in this year is our ability to do calculations. So there's been a lot of updates kind of under the covers this year already to the way we support calculations within the Cube Viewer. Again, calculations are very critical to us, right? Because it enables that analyst role user to be able to generate, values themselves, right? To kind of create their own calculations in the Cube Viewer without asking a model developer, to modify a rule or to add a new member that represents, a rule-derived value that they want to show up in a report or, an analytics experience. So calculations, very important capability. But one of the things that we've never been able to do up to this point is to edit existing calculations. Although users could create a calculation, they had no way to edit that calculation after the fact. So that has just been released in the 106 release that came out about a week ago on premise, and it's still pending to come out, I think, at the end of next week on cloud and Planning Analytics test. But effectively in the product now, we can now edit existing calculations, so long as those calculations are kind of a basic calculation. More complex calculations are something that we're working to support. Right. And today, probably, a lot of our expert users, might have some sense of how to manually modify the MDX in order to, to kind of add a calculation, a completely custom calculation in the MDX. We're working towards enabling our customers to basically add calculations that are completely custom, just by entering an expression without having to understand the MDX editor. Right, so we're working on an all new kind of expression editor where users can just type in whatever calculation they want, and it'll start to generate a value. And then, of course, we need to be able to edit those calculations as well. One of the interesting things that we're looking at as we're building calculations is the concept of annotation or commentary for the calculations as well. So a user who's creating a report or kind of creating a cube viewer for presentation within Planning Analytics Workspace, they may want to create a calculation and also enable users to kind of understand the calculation by adding some sort of commentary. So we're going to look to expose this in a bit of a unique way as well. So as users hover over the calculation, they'll be able to see, some sort of information about the calculation that explains it. That's provided by the actual report author. One other thing that I'll actually show in a minute here is just our improvements around our drilling experience. So again, last year, the first half of this year, we were not able to do things like an export when you do a drill.
Hi everyone, I think Stuart's just dropped off. He was having some technical issues. We'll try and get him back very, very quickly. Just give us a minute. While we wait for Stuart to dial back in, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat and we will answer that.
Of course, is critical to basically all of our users using Planning Analytics Workspace and, of course, Planning Analytics for Excel. Lastly, maybe this is the last slide we'll show before we do a couple demos. Lots of enhancements to the modeling experience this year as well. So I already mentioned the improvements that we had to kind of managing web sheets through the modeling workbench. In fact, that enhancement supports more than just web sheets. It also supports shortcuts to objects as well. And if we have time, we'll do a bit of a quick demo of that. So we can basically create things like shortcuts to processes, shortcuts to views, and quickly organize our assets or objects within the model that we want to access in the modeling experience. In addition to this, we also introduced something this year called the Database Explorer, right? The Database Explorer is basically our user interface to support multiple different actions on objects of the same type. So for example, if you wanted to delete a number of subsets or a number of views at the same time, the Database Explorer provides that capability. In the remainder of 2025 and leading into 2026, our focus is going to be sort of moving towards not so much the actual Turbo Integrator process editor and rule editor themselves, but in terms of providing interfaces such as like a guided import capability that allows us to actually generate Turbo Integrator code through kind of mapping data sources to cubes or mapping data sources, flat files or ODBC data sources to dimensions. So this is an area that we're still kind of working on within the modeling workbench. Again, the idea is to even for modelers to kind of better support users who are maybe don't know how to write their own Turbo Integrator code, or they don't know how to write rules and feeders, be able to create Turbo Integrator code that performs tasks like guided imports from ODBC data sources or flat files, two cubes or two dimensions. In addition to this, we're also going to try and open up the number of data sources that we actually kind of support out of the box. So one of the interesting things is that within the modern planning analytics experiences that we do support kind of REST API based connections to a large variety of data sources. So for example, we could show how REST API calls can be used to kind of issue like things like SQL queries to Snowflake and Databricks. and use that to pull data into TM1 cubes without the need for ODBC drivers or flat files. That's already possible within the product today, but we're going to try and make that a little bit easier by providing the guided import experience around that, where you can just provide the details for things like the instance of Snowflake, the catalog, the database, and then we'll actually generate the Turbo Integrator code that pulls data, issues a SQL query and pulls data into TM1 for you. Okay, actually, this is the last slide that we'll cover. A few other things just to mention around kind of administration of planning analytics, or the administration area. We've made pretty good improvements this year to content management already. So one of the things that may not be noticeable in the product, but was a big enhancement, is kind of our rework of the lifecycle management capability. So prior to June this year, there's actually a limitation of about 25 megabytes when using the lifecycle management feature to create snapshots and import and export those snapshots. That limitation has effectively been removed. Right now, we're kind of testing a 200
Hi, sorry, team. We're trying to get Stuart back again. He was having some technical issues. We'll get him back shortly.
customers on premise could use it, and then things like quota management for environments, right? So when you're using our multi-tenancy, you can kind of control which environments have access to resources. Okay, with that, I'm going to switch over to show my screen here, and we're actually going to kind of walk through a couple demos within the product itself. So just quickly refresh here. The first thing I wanted to show is an important enhancement to our selector widgets and workspace books. So in order to do this, we're actually going to create a new book, and we'll use our planning sample database here. We'll just pull kind of one of the default sample views into the book. Then we're going to enable synchronization on this. Just enable synchronization on all the hierarchies. So today in the product, we support selector widgets, right? So it's very common today to pull one of these selector tiles out to the canvas here. And this provides, through synchronization, the ability to select a member, and the member that we select, synchronizes to the view here, right? And this works, of course, whether we're looking at the cube view widget or this is a visualization, a chart of some sort. If we do the same trick on the row or column axis here, we can actually see that we have a selector widget, where the selector widget allows us to pick from the list of different subsets. So these are all different subsets that exist. And of course, as I pick a subset here, we see this reflect. One of the things that some people were familiar with that we introduced kind of mid last year was the multi-select list widget. So the multi-select list widget allows us to pick multiple members here. And then our selection of multiple members that we pick actually get synchronized to the view. Effectively, what we're doing here with this widget is picking a set within a set. But for those that have used this widget, this multi-select list widget, you'll notice that this one actually looks a little bit different. This is an update that we're planning on releasing in September. And the difference here is that we're actually showing checkmark boxes in this multi-select list widget, right? So this is a fairly significant enhancement. Why? Because it basically enables the user, or it tells the user that this widget can be used for multi-select. In addition to this, one of the really neat things about this is that we can actually search in here and use it as sort of an additive search in order to add members to the selected set. So if we enable aliases here, what you'll notice is that when we search, right, we can do something like this where we search and we find bank charges here. Then we could search for another member, let's say costs. Then we add these two costs, and then I'll click out here, hit the apply button, and then we can see bank charges, direct costs, other costs added. So not only did we add checkmark boxes here, which makes it really obvious that this is intended to be a multi-select list widget, we also kind of reworked the way the search works in here. So, the search is sort of conducive to actually selecting multiple members and adding them or removing them from a set. Again, this works the same way. If I search for a member that's added, I can deselect it, hit the apply button here, and then quickly remove that member from the list. In addition to this, though, one of the pieces of feedback that we've had about the multi-select list widget is that it's useful, but users often don't want to use it when they're authoring books simply because it takes up too much space. So 107, the release in September, or I suppose it'll also be the 2.1.14 release, is also going to include a multi-select drop-down widget as well. And same as the multi-select list widget, it's sort of the exact same widget, just not in list form. So again, we see this list of members here. And from the list of members, we could pick a set of members here, click the apply button, and then we're now filtering on this set of members. If we expand this again, we see the members that are already selected. Again, we could deselect some members here, hit the apply button, and then you'll see those members change. So same widget, really. It's just a bit of a different implementation. The advantage of this form of the widget, right, is it just reduces the amount of space on the workspace book. So if you need to have multiple of these widgets, you could add them to the book without using up a ton of space. One thing I like to point out is that the search works the exact same way. The other neat thing here is that this box is actually resizable. So if you do have a very large set, for example, you're looking at all the members in a very large dimension or hierarchy here, and you need a bit more room as the user to kind of see these members. We do have kind of an expand option here, which allows you to kind of see more members at one time. One other thing I want to point out is that these multi-select widgets, they are intended to actually pair with an existing capability within Workspace books, and I'll actually enable this on the Cube viewer. Actually, let's do this. Let's actually create a duplicate of this widget. And with the duplicate of the widget, we'll go to the synchronization. We'll look at the hierarchies, and then we'll go to advanced synchronization here. The advanced synchronization feature, it allows us to control what the widget does with the information that's synchronized. So when we synchronize, we're sending you either a member or a list of members to the other widgets. In this case, we're going to send a list of members, a set of members on the plan chart of accounts dimension. But the widget in the bottom, we're actually going to tell it to show us the aggregate, right? So once this is configured, as I change my selections here, right, I'll do something like pick all members here, and then maybe deselect. Actually, we'll just pick all members here. We can see that the widget on the top is showing us the list of members that was selected, the full list. The widget on the bottom is showing us the aggregate of those members. Right? Maybe a little bit difficult to tell, but if we add a couple values in here, we just switch this over to some leaf level member here. Let's just add something where we can enter some data. Nope, not that. Try this one more time. I think if we pick the beginning member here, Well, no worries. Here, we'll just add a. Maybe we didn't pick a good view because it simply has no data in here. Well, no worries if we don't actually have any data to show. I mean, I guess we'll just have to trust that the the widget in the bottom is showing the aggregate. The widget in the top is showing the list of members, right? So again, one of the previous kind of pieces of feedback that we've gotten about planning analytics versus kind of some of the older TM1 clients is that planning analytics doesn't have user-defined consolidations, right? That's exactly what this is, right? We're providing an experience here where the user gets to pick some members from a set, and then they can either choose to show those members or they can choose to show like a consolidation of those members, right? Basically, we're just generating the consolidation on the fly though. Okay, with that, the next thing that I actually want to show is sort of an extension of this as well. And that is the ability to use our action buttons to also kind of export sets of members or to work with sets of members within Planning Analytics Workspace. So here I'm going to add a button, and the button is basically just going to export the current set. Again, we'll use this plan chart of accounts dimension still. So one of the things that some people often miss is that our buttons already work with synchronization, right? The synchronization between the widgets, it applies to the buttons as well. And the way it applies is that members that are selected can be passed to a turbo integrator process, through a parameter, typically a string parameter, right? So an existing capability that we have in the product is to do this, where we basically state we want to synchronize a member. If this isn't familiar to you, this option here, synchronize member, that's because we kind of reworked the interface to make it a little bit more obvious as to what this is. In previous releases, we basically just got a list of the synchronization groups within this control type element. And then you had to sort of know that the synchronization group that you picked was going to be used to pass a member. But what this actually where we pick a synchronization group, right? So we have a kind of synchronization group for the sheet we're looking at within the book. And then we pick a dimension and then a hierarchy within that dimension. This is just a list of the dimensions that exist within the synchronization group, right? So with this, if we were to pick a name subset, right? So if we pick something like a subset here called N-level accounts, as I click this button to actually run the process, we see N-level accounts being passed. If I change the subset here, something like consolidations and click this button, we see the consolidations subset. Now, the way this actually works is pretty interesting. It doesn't just pass the name of the subset, right? Because the name of the subset itself doesn't help us that much. If we want to kind of have some turbo integrator code that does something like iterates over the members within the subset. So I'll actually kind of show a little bit of technical detail here. As I click the OK button to actually run this process, we can switch over to the modeling workbench, and we can actually go take a peek at the turbo integrator code to see what it. So this turbo integrator process, it simply takes two string parameters, pmember and pset. The value I passed was to pset. And then we can see with pset, it's basically generating a subset. It's using the subset create by MDX function to generate a subset here. And then the subset that it generates, it simply iterates over and then writes that subset out to a file. So if we go and look at the actual file output here, the file that it's creating, the set.txt file, and we view this, we can see the list of members here being passed through. What actually got passed to the turbo integrator process was simply this MDX statement, where the subset, the name subset here, gets passed as the parameter, one of the parameters in this TM1 subset to set function, right? Why? Because this TM1 subset to set function, it allows us to generate a subset, or it's basically creating a subset that reflects this subset, right? And we're doing it basically as a temporary subset. So we're basically passing through a small piece of MDX, which kind of represents the set, so we can use that set within our turbo integrator code. Now, what's really interesting about this is that this actually works even with unnamed sets. So if we were to pop into the set editor, and then we just start picking a couple members. So for example, I'll pick the first three members here from other expenses, and just those members. When we do this, we actually get a selection, which is basically our terminology for an unnamed set within the workspace book, right? It's basically the widget, the QView widget here is remembering that this is on the row axis a set of these three members. But when we actually click the button here, we'll see that it is going to pass the selection, right? And if we actually click this and run the process, what we'll see happens when we go to look at the output is that we'll see it still passed a piece of MDX, but the MDX that it passed uses something called a session set ID. And this session set ID, kind of embedded within this MDX statement, allows us to generate a set of these three members. It's basically a temporary object that's kind of managed internally to TM1, but you can use this to kind of pass unnamed sets to a turbo integrator process. Again, the use case for this is really varied, but it basically comes down to using the set of members on one of the axes of the cube viewer or a visualization to provide some sort of context to the turbo integrator process. Effectively, this allows us, if we do this on multiple sets or kind of pass multiple sets through to the process, it allows us to kind of run some turbo integrator code in TM1 that operates exactly on the context of the view that we're looking at. So the user can use selector widgets or selector tiles within the cube viewer in order to kind of generate a view of data and then click a button where it actually interacts with that, either an export, a transformation of the data. There's even ways to do kind of imports to exactly the slice of data using the cube view that you're looking at as kind of a range of data to import into. So a bit of a technical feature, but kind of also pairs well with our new selector widgets that we're about to release in September as a sort of mechanism to kind of pass context to processes based on selections within workspace books. While we're in the workspace book, the other thing that I do want to kind of quickly show here is just our enhancements to our drilling. So this actually came out in 105 about 2 months ago. It was released, but it's an important feature because it does kind of change what you can actually do with our drill through capability within Workspace. So again, before this, when you actually did a drill through, what you would have noticed is that the drill works, but we simply don't have the toolbar up at the top here. And if we wanted to access the set editor, we wouldn't be able to. The set editor option basically just didn't exist within this menu. And if you saw that it existed here and click this, nothing would happen. it simply wouldn't open up the the set editor. This is completely configurable. So if we want to use the sandbox feature here, we can use it. If we want to allow users to export the view here, we can enable or disable this. And this is simply controlled through the widget itself, the source widget in the book. If we do something like customize the widget and the toolbar settings, let's say to get rid of the sandbox and the export capability, or if we disable access to the set editor through this widget, the CubeViewer widget, what we'll notice is that when we go to drill here, do a drill, again, the export button is gone, the sandbox button is gone, and then the access to the set editor has been removed as well. So while we did add these capabilities in, we're sort of one of the default views here. And then let's look at some data here. Say if we grab the first 3 months here and then did a calculation, we could do a calculation that shows, for example, the aggregate of these 3 months, right? And we could call this quarter one, my quarter one. This is a good example of a calculation. Again, previous versions of Workspace, if I were to right click on this calculation, we'd only have the option to remove the calculation. And now we can actually edit the calculation, right? So we can come back here, and if we wanted to change this from an average to, or sorry, an aggregate to like an average, we could do that, right? We also have the ability to rename calculations in the past. That hasn't changed, but now we can also edit the calculations as well. Likewise, I think I already mentioned this, but if you're not a fan of the green color for the calculations, you want the calculations to show up with a slightly different color. That's also customizable within Planning Analytics Workspace. This is a sort of customization feature that was released a little bit earlier this year. Maybe last thing I'll show, just because it's one of the nicer looking features that's kind of recent within Workspace, is our ability to do our level-based or sort of member-based formatting, right? So if we're looking at the regions here, we can see that there's a couple different levels. 2 ways to kind of access this. We could go into the format manager and then start applying the formats on the hierarchy, picking our dimension and hierarchy. We have a nice shortcut to this. Basically click any member within this hierarchy, and then go to the hierarchy settings under the format manager section here, and then start applying the formats. The one that's kind of most intuitive for most people is level-based formats, where we're kind of showing levels with different colors, right? So we can just pick shades of, let's say, green to kind of show this, right? Starting with this mint green color. So we can apply, oh, clicked on the wrong thing there. Yeah, we'll just pick shades of green, kind of getting darker and darker. And we'll add a couple more. So we have a sort of a base level set, do level 2. One of the pieces of feedback that we've had about our formatting is that it is better because we have more formatting capabilities within the product, but the formatting can be very time consuming to set for a view. Doing things like setting this customized formatting can be quite tedious or ends up being a lot of work. While we can't necessarily make the formatting kind of easier to set initially, what we are working on right now is making this formatting reusable. So if we've taken the time to kind of set the formatting on each of the levels here, the idea is that we could kind of then take this formatting that's been configured in the format manager, and with that formatting, persist it to basically to other views, right? So we could set it once, or kind of create the like a bit of a format template once, and then once the formatting has been set, quickly apply that format configuration to other views, right? So now with my 4-level set here, if I click the done button, we can see the formatting taking priority here, right? As we do things like expand and collapse, or if we add new members, because the format is based on the level here, we'll see the formatting automatically being applied, right? So again, much more capabilities added in to be able to actually format and provide nicer looking presentations with the Cube viewer. But on top of that, we've also changed how formatting can be applied, making it easy to apply this formatting based on properties of the member. That way we can kind of set the formatting once for this Cube viewer, and then as the members are updated in dimension or hierarchy, we kind of see the impact of those changes happening in real time. Okay, with that, I see there are a couple questions. So plans and applications that they're contributing to. But yes, we would like to be able to provide kind of more configuration. I can't say this is not on the roadmap for this year, but I think our plan is by mid 2026 to kind of start taking a deeper look at the homepage to provide an overhaul. What I can say is that we are tracking an enhancement request already for this, the ability to to configure which plans and applications show up in which order for specific uses. Okay, next question. Is there future?
Hi everyone. I think we're still having some technical issues with Stuart. He will jump back in and take care of the questions. In the meantime, if you still have any other additional questions, just put it in the chat and we'll get it answered. If you're not able to do it in time today, we'll get an answer back to you.
To what makes it unpredictable, because that's not something that we've heard before. We know it is.
Sorry, you dropped off in the last maybe a minute or
Oh,
so. If you don't mind repeating, yeah.
Yeah, so I was just reading out the question for the MDX parameterization. It was just that the MDX, I guess it's more feedback, right? The MDX parameterization is powerful, but it tends to behave unpredictably when used with custom MDX. So the MDX parameterization is intended to kind of support custom MDX, right? You're basically parameterizing an MDX statement that you've kind of written out. Once you start the parameterization, we kind of consider it as customized. And you'll notice when you use it, the cube viewer is locked down. Like you can't swap rows and columns. You can't use the set editor.
I think we've lost Stu again. What we might do is we'll kill the session today for now. We've almost reached time anyway. And what we will do is we will organize for all the answers to be sent out or put on LinkedIn or wherever you've asked. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Are there any plans? Oh, sorry, not about plans and applications. Okay. The question is,
you dropped off again, so you probably missed the last.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, I'll just reread the last question. Are there plans to have the text font size show your chosen font family instead of always defaulting to IBM Plex? The same also applies to having the fill color show your chosen color palette. We are working on improving defaults, right? So we have this sort of concept of, like setting a default kind of format template for at least for the cube viewer widget for now. But part of the template format for the cube viewer would allow you to set things like the default font. Right. Also, like a default color palette, that would definitely be possible. So today you can adjust those things, but you can't really kind of set them as the default. We plan to kind of wrap all of those kind of settings into what we're basically calling a format template for the cube viewer, and then you can use that as a mechanism to set defaults. So a bit of a difficult question to provide an exact answer to, but yes, that there are plans to kind of improve things like the presentation of the default font, default colors, for at least for the cube viewer widget immediately. Probably leading into 2026, we'll also look at the same for some of the other widgets like the visualizations as well. Okay, so just again on the custom MDX, without custom MDX, it's nearly impossible to replicate the kind of reports users typically will create in Excel. So yeah, understood. One of the things that is part of our roadmap is enhancing kind of the parameterization feature to support custom MDX. The other thing that we're working on though is just enhancing the advanced synchronization capabilities. So the demo that I provided, it kind of worked in the advanced synchronization capabilities, kind of allowing the widget to determine what it does with a synchronized member or a subset that's being synchronized to the widget. There's definitely lots of enhancements that we're planning there. So a good example of this is if you pass a set of members today, you can show the set of members, you can show an aggregate of the set of members, you can show the aggregate and the set of members, right? You basically have those three options. Missing options that we're planning to add later this year or kind of the start of 2026 would be to do things like show the set of members and all the children of the set of members, right? Or show all the leaf level members below the selected set of members, right? So we are looking at some of these sort of use cases where people are kind of setting custom MDX and then using the parameterization of MDX and trying to provide a very simple way to kind of configure widgets to just have that behavior, right? Yeah, so your point that not everyone wants to write, not that everyone wants to write or anyone wants to write custom MDX. Absolutely, we agree with that 100%. In fact, we'd sort of state that the intent of Planning Analytics Workspace is to make it, to enable users to kind of have interactions like they would have had in Excel by parameterizing an MDX statement, where like a selected member is used to parameterize an MDX statement, but basically just provide those as kind of widget configuration options through the synchronization feature. Right, so anything you could do in Excel, the intent is eventually, in terms of kind of interactions where you parameterize MDX statements and like pass that to things like the TM1 set function or TM1 RPT row function, we want to be able to do through kind of configuration of the widgets in Workspace without actually having to understand MDX. Right, again, we just want to provide options like, show the list of members or show the list of members and the children or aggregate the list of members, right? Options that are kind of easy enough for users to understand, where they can kind of predict understand the behavior of the widget based on the selected option that they picked. Okay. I think that covers the majority of the questions that we can answer. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Stuart. That was really helpful. I'd like also to thank everyone who attended and asked the questions to make this interesting and engaging. We did have some technical issues, but I think we managed to get past it. If there are still anything that you still have not managed to get an answer to, we will review all the questions and get back to you individually. Feel free to let us know if you need any further help with any of the things discussed today. Once again, Stuart, thanks a lot. That was really good. Good to get the insights from inside the product team. Really appreciate it to openly share what you guys are up to and what you're doing. And we really appreciate what you do for the product. So thanks once again.
Always happy to kind of show off what we're doing. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.